What's up, everybody? It's Goomer22 here, bringing you another VDL draft video. Today, we're going to talk about the tiers from this last Series 10 non-Dynamax, no restricted season. Um, and we're just going to go through possible shifts I think that could happen in the tier list that I think could be pretty interesting. Go through what was picked, what wasn't, sort of. So yeah, I think it could be interesting. So in tier one, honestly, I thought tier one was uh, pretty solid for the most part. Most of these mons, I can see a ton of value in them. Lots of people picked tier ones, especially with their free points as well. So clearly they saw a lot of value too. Um, there are a few though where I feel like you could argue moving them down. Um, so one of them is Dusclops, I think. I think Dusclops has typically been rated high in this league, and I mean, it's definitely a solid mon. Um, Definitely pretty annoying, but I think you could definitely argue it for tier two in draft, given that well, you don't have to run Eviolite, but it's really, really common on Dusclops, um, and I feel like we haven't really seen anybody use it either. So I think that could be an interesting option, Trick Room Setter to add to the tier two. Um, Another one, I think. So Darmanitan Galar is interesting. Um, it's got a ton of power. It's locked into one move with if you use Guerrilla Tactics. Um, and it's pretty similar to the other Darm, but I guess what's weird is so Darmanitan Galar's in tier one. Darmanitan, um, the normal one, is in tier two. I don't. Here's the thing. I could see them both being in tier one or both being in tier two, but I feel like they should be the same because there's trade offs. Like they both have a ton of power, but there's just trade offs. So one trade off is that Darmanitan Galar, I would argue, has a little bit better Zen mode. So that's one thing. But if you're going to use their main ability, the Guerrilla Tactics or the Sheer Force, with Guerrilla Tactics, you're locked into a move. Um, and with this Darmanitan Sheer Force, so it's only 30% boost compared to the 50% boost, and you can only use certain moves with it. It's not just going to be 50% regardless, but you can at least switch your moves around, and you can also protect. So the ability to protect and swap your moves versus just raw power, basically choice banded. Um, I think you can make a case that they're similar, and so you plus if you want to use a stab move for Darmanitan Galar, I mean you can use Ice Punch, but you might have to use like Icicle Crash, which isn't 100% accurate. Whereas like Flare Blitz with Darmanitan is, and so that's honestly probably going to be more powerful than a 50% boosted Icicle Crash. But regardless, I just think they should be in the same tier. So I don't know if people think they should both be in tier one, both be in tier two. I'm back and forth on it. Um, but I think they should probably be in the same tier. And it's pretty clear why this, Darmanitan was drafted and the other one wasn't. Because it was good value in tier two. Okay, so the only other ones in tier one that I think can be moved down, one I think is Politoed. Um, I think it's good. It's a rain setter, right? I mean, the other one, Pelipper, is in uh, tier two, and I know some people don't like Pelipper, but I think Pelipper's got a lot of good tools in uh, in Series 10. I think they just filled different roles. Pelipper, I would say, is um, maybe a little more offensive. I mean, it's got that stab hurricane with the rain already set up. Whereas Politoed, you'd have to run like Ice Beam, if you want to hit like grass types or something like that. You've got speed control with Pelipper with Tailwind. You've also got Wide Guard, but Politoed gets some interesting utility like, Perish Song and stuff. So they do different things. Politoed's definitely a little bit bulkier. Doesn't have the 4 times weakness, but I think Politoed could be in tier two for sure. Another one is Tyranitar. The thing about in a non, I mean, yes, it sets sand. It's really strong. Um, a lot of stuff gets close combat, and in draft, if you're just running close combat against T-Tar, like you are just gonna smack that thing. You don't even have to be stab. Obviously in Dynamax, it could max and like live a huge close combat or like max Knuckles from stuff, which is actually weaker. But so in max, I can totally understand it being tier one. In non-max, I feel like you could almost argue tier two. Um, so that's I mean that I don't know. That's my take. That's um, and those were three mons that weren't drafted. Some of the few, like a lot of tier ones were drafted. Some of the few ones that weren't. You could maybe make a few other cases if you wanted to add to tier two, but those seem like more of the um, more obvious options, I guess, to me. All right, so in tier two, let's jump over here. So we already talked about Darmanitan. I think that could definitely be tier one with the other Darmanitan, or you can shift them both to tier two. I think they're both viable options. Another one, Entei, which I drafted this season, I thought was really good value as tier two. I feel like it could honestly be a tier one. I mean, you have Inner Focus and a unique move, Sacred Fire, which like nothing really wants to switch into. Really fast, extreme speed. Like I feel like Entei could definitely be a tier one. We're seeing it used a ton in the meta right now too, which doesn't always correlate to draft, but regardless, I just think Entei is so good, and I definitely could see it as tier one. Another one is Primarina, which Auto is using really well this season. I mean, Primarina I think is a lot better in a non-max format because you can reliably run Hyper Voice and you don't have to worry about like in max if Hyper Voice was your only water move, then if you maxed, it wouldn't be max Geyser. It would be max Strike. And so it was worse. But in non max, you can just run Hyper Voice and it's spread, no drawback really. Um, and it's just so strong, so hard to take down. I think Water Fairy is one of the best typings. Um, and yeah, I think Primarina could definitely be up here in the tier ones. Um, Regigigas. I just don't think Regigigas is super useful. Um, you can do some silly stuff with it, but it's in a non-max. I just think it's um, unreliable. Um, yeah, terrible ability. Obviously, you got to pair it with like Weezing or get rid of it, and just that setup. Even then, afterwards, like I don't think it's got a ton of utility. It's got some, but like I think this thing should be tier three for sure. Um, and then so yeah, I think Giga should be tier three. Um, I would say Scolipede. I know it's got speed boost, but like, which is more interesting in this format. But I don't know. I feel like you could put it in tier three. I just don't see people wasting a tier two pick on this thing. And even in tier three, I don't know that they would. They might, but it doesn't feel amazing to me. It's in the same speed. It's in the same tier as Blaziken, right? And Blaziken has speed boost, but I think it's Blaziken's got a much better typing, much better offenses. Um, I think it has better defenses too. I'm not totally sure, but um, yeah, Scolipede. I think you can definitely drop to tier three. The last one I would say is honestly Venusaur. I know it was drafted, but it's funny. Venusaur, it's mainly good in chlorophyll and sun and whatnot, but like you look at Venusaur compared to something like Vileplume. Vileplume's a tier 5, Venusaur's a tier 2. Look at their base stats. Extremely similar, except Venusaur has more speed, like 80 or something like that, or 83, compared to Vileplume's 50. But if you have chlorophyll, you can EV it to where you outspeed most stuff anyways. So like I wouldn't even say that's a big issue. They have very similar stats. Vileplume actually has higher special attack, I'm pretty sure. There's no reason that Venusaur should be tier two. Um, so yeah, I feel like it should definitely be tier three, especially because like other stuff like that was better in Max, like Charizard's tier three. You know, It's like Charizard does have a 4 times weakness, but like, why is Charizard tier 3 and Venusaur is tier 2? I would say Charizard's maybe more useful than Venusaur. In non-max even. I don't know. Okay, so that's tier 2. Let's go to tier 3. Tier 3, honestly, I think Aromatisse is one of the best Trick Room setters. Its ability, Aroma Veil, allowing both you and your partner to not be taunted, just phenomenal. And it's really bulky, tough to take down. I just think that uniqueness, it deserves tier 2 because of that. Um, so, uh, yeah, Aromatisse is just really solid. Next up, Bisharp. Bisharp is just so good. Um, it's got you can run inner focus if you don't want to be faked out, or if they have intimidate or you think your stats can be lowered, you can run defiant. It's got that super strong stab sucker punch. Assurance is super powerful. Um, it's just it's just a really good bond that you have to account for, and I think um, yeah, with its power, I think it definitely deserves tier 2. Um, you can also, it's got some interesting utility moves too. Buzzwole, I would say. You could argue tier 2. It's got that beast boost, and if you get going, um, you know, it can be really tough to take down. It does have a 4 times weakness, but it, I would say that without max, flying moves are a lot harder to come by. So you can't just run Hurricane. I mean you can without the without weather, but you risk missing it. Um, Fly, anything that gets fly, obviously you can just run protect on Buzzwole, and then you have to worry about it. Um, so yeah, I think the fact that flying moves are harder to come by, um, Buzzwole, you could definitely argue tier 2. And the other thing is when I'm for all these changes, like you might hard disagree or agree, which I'd love to hear about in the comments. But um, overall, like if the tier list stayed the exact same, I really wouldn't have a huge problem with it. Um, there are definitely mons I feel stronger about than others with these suggestions, but these are just things I thought of when I scrolled through it, popped out to me. It was like, this was pretty strong. Maybe it could be moved up. This was pretty weak. Maybe it could move down. And I really tried to take coach usage of it out of the equation. I tried to think about the mon itself. Like, is this a strong mon? Can it be abused? Was it even on a even if you were it was on a good team, could it do that much in that tier? How useful is it? Um, and so yeah. Next up, Colossal. I mean, nobody drafted it. I don't think Colossal is super useful. You can maybe do some gimmicks with it, but just as a mon itself, I would say it's probably tier 4. Um, yeah, I don't see it being super useful on its own. And even so, just in non-max, it's just not the same as Dynamax. Same thing, Durant. If you look at Durant, it's interesting. Without hustle too, you look at Durant's stats and you're like, man, this thing isn't like actually that good. And again, if you're gonna run hustle, you risk missing your moves. So I honestly, and you get the 4 times weakness. Somebody Dunsparce breathes on it with a flamethrower instead. So uh, I don't. I think you can definitely argue that Durant should be tier 4. Next up, we just keep going on these Dynamax mons. Flapple, another hustle mon. You look at Flapple's stats and you're like, why is this thing in tier 3? It's actually not that good. And I mean, I'd be interested to see somebody try it and do well with it. But like, yeah, I don't think Flapple is that good, and I think it's more of a tier 4 type of mon. Plus, it's got that 4 times weakness again. You know, Icy Wind or something, it's gonna hurt. Um, Let's see, Gorgegeist. Gorgegeist, I used it last season. Obviously, that was during Dynamax, but like, I just think Frisk is so powerful in draft, um, and it's got good typing, Ghost Grass, Ghost obviously because he can't be faked out, and you've got Trick Room. It's got a unique move with Trick or Treat, and the ability to fluctuate your base stats. I think is a really unique and just awesome tool that Gorgegeist has, and so I really think you could make the case for Tier Two Gorgegeist. Maybe people wouldn't pick it there. I think you still could for sure. I think it's just a. I mean, I think Gorgegeist is a really solid mon. So um, I think because of that uniqueness and whatnot, tier two is definitely possible for it. Next up, I feel like you could almost argue Inteleon in tier two. I mean, it's super fast, and you've got Sniper, and you can throw Scope Lens on it and ignore redirection. That's huge. It's so powerful, especially because a Snipe Shot crit could OHKO some things in a non-max format, whereas in Dynamax, if you were going to Dynamax Inteleon, you lose that Snipe Shot redirection ignore ability. So if you want to ignore the redirection, you have to stay non-maxed. Whereas everything has to stay non-maxed now. So I think that and fast soaks really powerful. I think Inteleon you could definitely argue tier two. Kangaskhan. We saw Lucian use it extremely well. So strong with Fake Out Last Resort. I think again the uniqueness of Fake Out, Scrappy, only Pokemon who can Fake Out Ghost types in draft. That's so useful. And you don't even have to. I mean, Lucian ran it a ton. I personally think it's probably one of the best sets. That you're going to use on Kangaskhan. But yeah, Fake Out Last Resort just chunks like everything, unless you have a solid Rock or Steel type switch in. And even then, Kangaskhan gets like some fighting moves. So yeah, I think you could argue Kangaskhan tier two for sure. Oranguru. Oranguru, I think, is absolutely tier two. Where is Oranguru? Oh, yeah, Oranguru, such a good Trick Room setter. You get inner focus, so you can't be faked out. Normal Psychic's a phenomenal typing. You're only weak to Dark and Bug. And just its abilities, its other two abilities too, even if you're not running inner focus, Symbiosis and Telepathy, phenomenal. You can do so much stuff with it in draft. And you have the unique ability of Instruct, or the unique move of Instruct. Like, Saki used it so well this season. Secret captain of the team probably, but yeah, I just think Oranguru is definitely a tier two Trick Room setter. What else? Regis. I mean, Regis has really good base stats, but like I just think it doesn't fit any roles super well, and for that reason, I feel like it's tier four. Um, it's not super strong. I mean, it is defensive, but it's hard to be stally with it, and it's just not. It's I mean, and it's not super great defensively. I mean, it has some uh, okay defense, but yeah, it's more of a special wall, and I just feel like if you're gonna get an ice type, you want something else that is like fast and can dish out damage potentially. Like ice isn't a good defensive typing in general, so yeah, I definitely would say it's a tier four mon. Another one I think that you could argue is maybe Sandaconda. Um, not great special defense. Um, and it's I mean, you can probably do some interesting things in non-max. You could also definitely leave it as tier three, but I think if you're trying to fit some more mons in a tier four, it's probably on the lower end of the tier threes here. Um, it's got good defense, and you can obviously do body press stuff with it, but yeah, I don't know. It's in an awkward speed tier, 71, which I guess you could scarf. It's not a bad scarf tier, but um, it's just awkward in general. Um, so I don't know. You could leave it in tier three if you want, but that's just another option. I thought that if you wanted to throw it in tier four, you could do that. And I think that wraps up the tier threes. Let's go through tier four. Tier four. I know Arctivish wasn't drafted, but like I think Arctivish is definitely better than Arctozolt. Just for the sole fact that ice is bad against water and steel. Um, or well, and fire, but um, I just think water ice um, is potentially a little more useful. Um, because if you only because by itself, I guess you could make the argument for either one. But if you are running a hail mode, you've got a hail setter, likely an ice type. And so if you've got two ice types on the field, you know, with Arctozolt, you're going to be really weak to fire, really weak to rock. I mean, you're still weak to rock with Arctivish, but like at least you can smack it back with a Vicious Rend, and you can also smack fire types. Arctivish also gets Aurora Veil, which Arctozolt does not get, I believe. So the fact that you get Aurora Veil and you can smack Ice's weaknesses back with the Water Stab, I feel like you could argue that Arctivish should at least be the same as Arctozolt. So if I mean, I don't know if you want to drop Arctozolt down to tier four, that could work too, I guess. But like they should, I feel like they should be in the same tier. Um, and then let's see, Articuno, another one that Lucian used super well. I feel like Articuno's it's good base stats and it's got utility. It's got Tailwind, Ice Shard. I feel like you could throw it in tier three. Um, I don't know. It's it seems strong enough. It seems like it's got some nice tools, and it's with banded triple axles, you can do some big damage, uh, as we've seen from Lucian. So I don't know. You could leave Articuno here, but I think you could also make the case for tier three, um, almost purely based on just the base stats. Right? There's so much, and you can even if you're worried about like rock moves like Brunchardi or something. I don't even know if it dies to most rock slides unless you're pretty strong. As long as you run defensive. Another one. Duosion. Duosion, I just honestly feel like there's better picks in tier four than if people are gonna waste their pick on a Eviolite Duosion. Um, I think there's just a lot better options. Like, um, I would throw Duosion in tier five, personally. Even there, like I don't even know if I would pick it. Maybe, but I mean, it is really strong, and you can set Trick Room with it, obviously, and whatnot. But you might be more limited on item choice, and yeah, I just don't see people picking this in tier four. Electivire, I think, is pretty solid. Um, its immunity to electric and the ability to get that speed boost is pretty nice. You can go physical or special. You got Volt Switch. I think you could throw Electivire in tier three for sure. Fungus, Redirector, Regenerator, pretty bulky with Eviolite. You got Spore. I think you can argue tier three for Fungus. I don't know. Same thing with I think is Tangela in here. I didn't put that on my list, but yeah, same thing with Tangela almost. Although Tangela doesn't get Spore, um, but I almost feel like you could put those redirectors in tier three. Just redirection in general is pretty powerful, and it's not like they're like weak redirectors like a Togepi, which I think is also in this tier. And I would argue that both of them are maybe better, even though you can use goggles to prevent it. Like I don't know, bringing Togepi as one of your four mons seems um, not super useful. So yeah, I would say with the utility Fungus has, you could definitely argue tier three. Another one is Glaceon. Glaceon hits super hard. I don't know why it's in tier four. Like maybe because it's just an ice type. I don't know. I feel like Glaceon's really strong, and you definitely have to respect it. I think it's got, I forget if Glaceon has good special bulk. I feel like it does. Or maybe it's got good defense. I can't remember. I think it's got one of them, either a high defense or high special defense. But I think you could definitely argue Glaceon tier 3. Jolteon, same thing. Especially because, like, I mean, 130 base speed, and it's pretty strong. You've got Volt Switch. Quick feed ability, so the ability to passively gain speed just by protecting, so powerful. Um, and then you can just smack whatever you want. You can Thunder Wave it. You can hit it with just a big T-Bolt, Shadow Ball, whatever. Um, I think Jolteon could definitely be tier 3. Coughing, I mean, it's got the neutralizing gas, but I think that's a lot more useful in Dynamax for niche mons, and I think Coughing should be tier 5. I don't know. I would draft a bunch of tier 5s before I drafted a Coughing, I think. Magmortar, another pretty strong mon that I think you could maybe argue tier 3. Um, I mean, you could leave it in tier 4, I guess, but I don't know. I think it's pretty powerful. It's like 125 base special attack. That's pretty solid. It's good speed tier for a Scarf. Um, I don't know. I just think it feels like a lot of power for tier 4, but I don't know. The one that I was surprised it wasn't drafted was Obstagoon, maybe because of the 4 times fighting weakness fear. But I think in general, like just a nice fast knockoff. You've got Obstruct, which is pretty neat. You can, if people go into you I think it harshly lowers their defense. Um, so that's nice. Obviously, you've got Defiant to prevent intimidate or stat drops, and you've got guts. If you want to just wait out a turn and get that guts boost. I don't know. I think Obstagoon you could definitely um, argue should be tier 3. So yeah, I was surprised nobody picked it this season, especially with the. It felt like there was a. Um, I think it was hard to grab a good dark type. Another one, Thievul. I think the thing about Thievul is by itself, you might say like, oh, Thievul's not that great. It's gonna be tier 4. But like realistically, who's drafting Thievul? Somebody with terrain or somebody with some way to proc its unburden, right? So if you're drafting Thievul in terrain, I feel like Thievul gets a ton of value that way, and I feel like the fact that it has that potential to just be super useful and outspeed anything right off the bat and get some defense or special defense, I feel like it deserves tier 3. I mean, it's so strong. It's got Mud Shot for speed control. It's got Fake Tears. It's got Snarl for damage reduction. Such a good mon. Yeah, I feel like it definitely does not deserve tier 4. Should I think it should be tier 3. Zoroark is another one I think you could maybe argue should be tier 3. It's pretty strong, can go physical or special. And the mind games too with Zoroark are pretty interesting. You can really throw your opponent off for a game or two in draft. So, um, one cheeky win with it in draft can really help, and then you just got to win one of the next 2 games. So, um, I think Zoroark is pretty powerful. It's fast. Um, yeah, it just seems a lot better than some of these other tier 4 mods. The uniqueness, I think you can argue it for tier 3 for sure. Um, but yeah, that okay. So let's move on to tier 5. Only a couple in tier 5. Um, Corsola Galar. Corsola Galar. The thing about tier 5 is like a lot of these mons are mons that if somebody brings them to team preview, you're like, I don't have to worry about that too much. Like, I'll deal with it. But like, if there's a mon in tier 5 where you see it in team preview and you're like, whoa, I gotta get rid of that thing. That thing's annoying. Like, I feel like it doesn't deserve tier 5. And I think Corsola Galar fits that. You see a Corsola Galar and you're like, oh, geez, I gotta deal with this Corsola Galar. It's so annoying. Okay, well, it probably shouldn't be a tier 5 if it's really that annoying. And I just feel like it's good personally. I think it's got a lot of cool moves, and good defensive, win condition. I feel like it can definitely be tier 4. Um, and then the only other ones I would say is Skunk Tank. I think Batista showed us how good Skunk Tank can be. Now I think Skunk Tank you could still argue tier 5 for it for sure. But I don't know. I think it's pretty strong. Um, I feel like it fits with the power and utility of some of these tier 4s. It feels similarly useful. So I think you could definitely argue tier 5 for it. Or sorry, tier 4 for it. Um, but, I don't feel super strongly about that. Stonejourner, I absolutely think should be tier 4 at least. I mean, just the fact that you see Power Spot and the damage it does, and you're like, oh geez, I gotta deal with this. And it's like Stonejourner is pretty fast. It's actually really defensive, so like there's no way you're OHKOing this thing with a close combat. Like you got to use a special move, and even then you might not OHKO it unless you're super effective, especially because the other person can invest in special defense, and it's just like yeah, those passive type abilities like Power Spot that just do stuff even when you're just sitting out on the field and protecting, I think are really really useful in Series 10. So I think you can definitely argue Stonejourner for tier 4. It's super strong too. It's stronger than a lot of these tier 4s just by itself, and then the added bonus of making your partner 30% stronger. I mean, come on. Um, yeah, Stonejourner is a huge threat that you got to deal with, and so I think it should definitely be tier 4. And that's not all. So I also wanted to break down what people picked, um, what people use their free picks on, and maybe some potential shifts in the points of the tiers. So here's what I've got. Um, let's see. Let me move this thing. Get that a little smaller. Okay. Okay, so who picked what? So, of the 5 tiers, I went through and counted the available Pokemon, the total number of picks, percentage picks, and then what people use their free agent picks on. So, 42 of the 60 available tier 1s were picked, 70%. Makes sense. People saw value in that. Tons of people picked tier 2s. Now, I know you had to pick 2 tier 2s, but still, 23 free agent picks were used on tier 2s. That is insane. So people saw a lot of value in those, which makes sense why they were so limited. I mean, there was only after all of them were picked, there was only 16 left over unpicked. But like tiers 3 and 4, people really didn't see as much value in those. It was there was 58 of the 90 tier 3s picked, 53 of the 97 tier 4s. Tier 5, I have 101 plus because like obviously there's mons that are technically not on the tier list, considered quote too weak by the site that you could pick. So there's a lot more than 101 technically, but of the 101 that are listed, 40 of them were picked. And actually, I don't think anybody picked any quote too weak mons this season. So, and you might think like, okay, well, 16 people picked tier 5, so like maybe they saw a lot of value in those tier 5s. And I do think there are decent value for their points, but I don't think that's why people actually pick them. And I'm going to go into that on the next slide. So here's how it kind of broke down. So you have tiers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You get 250 points for your free picks, and the current points you have the way it's structured is so that you can't get 2 tier 1s basically with your free picks, which makes sense. But you can get a tier 1 and a tier 2. And I think if you look at the tier 1, tier 2s compared to the 3s, 4s, and 5s, I mean, some of the 3s, 4s, and 5s can compete, but there's a lot of like shifting, I think, that you could almost say between tier 1s and tier 2s where they're just good Pokemon compared to the others. And I think that's why 2/3 of the coaches opted for this first option, 1, 2, 5. And the reason being, they just want an extra 1, an extra 2, and then the 5's kind of a throwaway. I mean, maybe not. Maybe it's like a niche pick that can help. but like a lot of people were just like, oh, I can get a 1 and a 2. Let's do that. So I think people are going to gravitate towards options to make their draft a little more top heavy, and um, yeah, it's just almost an obvious option to pick there. Then you can pick 1-3-4, 2-3-3, or 2-2-4. So you can also get 2-2s. So if you notice from these options, um, every one of them contains a 2, except for the 1-3-4, which only 2 people picked. And one of them, the 2-2-4, actually contains 2-2s. So I feel like that in and of itself is why tier 2s were picked so much, because a lot of the options contain tier 2s, and they're good value, so it makes sense. Now, I don't know if the league wants to shift some of that incentive down a little bit, or I think there's still some really good mons in tier 3 and 4 that you can find. So I don't know if people wanted to shift that incentive or get a system that doesn't necessarily promote everyone to just snag like 1-2-5s. So like what my thought was, what if you just increased both the point total and all the tier points by 25? So if you notice, 250 to 275, so you get 25 more points, but everything has been increased by 25 points. And so what that does is it shifts the 4 options that you have for picking, for picking your free picks. And so what it does is like, okay, you can grab a tier 1, but if you want that really good value tier 1, now you have to pick a 4 and a 5. Whereas before it was a 2 and a 5. Whereas like if you can grab a 1 and a 2, I feel like that's just like a no-brainer, and that's why so many people did it. Whereas now it's like, okay, do I really want that 1? Like, how useful is this tier 1? Then I'll have to grab a 4 and a 5. Whereas this one I feel like is a little more balanced in the decisions that you have to make on your free points. Because again, you can get that tier 2, but then you got to grab a 4 and another 4, or you got to grab a 3 and a 5. I mean, that could be useful. Or you can just grab 2 3s and a 4. So, I think this is a little bit more balanced potentially. It does shift the power down a little bit, but overall, I think it could make some more interesting teams. Have people utilize some of these tier 3s and 4 mons a little bit more, which I think there are still really good mons in those tiers. So I actually don't think it'll like shift the power down too much, but I think it makes the free pick options a little more interesting, at least, because you already get a tier 1 and 2 tier 2s. Like that's definitely plenty of power and utility if you need it. So I don't know. Again, we could totally stick with the first option, and it could work. I'm sure people will change up their draft plan from what happened this season, but like, I still think a lot of people will gravitate towards these 1-2-5 and the 2-2-4 option, because getting the most amount of tiers 1s and 2s seems like the best option under the current system. So I don't know. That's just a thought I had. Obviously, you don't have to implement it, but it could be interesting. And I'm interested to hear your guys' thoughts on it. So let me know, and we will catch you with the next video. Peace.